This is the first election, I think, since 2006, I want to say, that has not taken place on Wednesday. So this election will be on a Monday, which means that that entire week is likely to be then spent by most of us at the IEC Results Center. Normally, when an election takes place on a Wednesday, the aim is to release the results on Saturday night. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, that's 4 days. The bulk of the counting takes place. I say here the bulk because any disputed results, etc., are usually only finalized in the following weeks. But by the Saturday, there are enough results in and collated in order to get a pretty accurate indication of what the results of the election are. So that's what would happen. It would be Wednesday to Saturday. This year we can, I think, anticipate that it'll be Monday to Thursday. I think it'll probably be Monday to Friday. Because with the big elections announcement on the Friday night, but we'll see. We'll also yet to hear from the IEC about whether they'll extend voting hours on that Monday and close the voting stations later in order to allow for more people to vote, but also to vote in a kind of socially distanced way. And so all of these details, I think we're still going to hear from the IEC. The IEC is also going to announce the final day for candidate registrations. So they're going to release their amended electoral timetable. We know, and this is pending the DA and the EFF's Constitutional Court appeal. But yeah, so this is, as far as dates go, I think this is where this is what we know for sure. Just a reminder to all of you about how the local government elections work. So the electoral system for local government elections is a mixed member proportional system. It's an MMP, and what that means is that it is a combination of first past the post elections for ward councillors. So those ward councillors stand in single member constituencies where the results are calculated on a majoritarian system. So the person in that ward, the candidate that wins the most number of votes, wins the ward. It's a zero-sum, winner takes all. If you get most votes, you win, and everybody else loses and falls away, and you become the ward councillor. And that first past the post single member constituency system is combined with a proportional representation electoral system with proportional representation councillors elected from closed party lists. And that mirrors the system that we've got at provincial and national level. And so all political parties submit lists of the candidates from the most favoured candidate to get a seat to the least favoured candidate to get a seat in the council. And the council seats in both municipalities and in local governments are divided equally between the ward seats and the PR seats. For district municipalities, that election only takes place through a proportional representation closed list ballot. And so, yeah, so that's the three, that's the electoral system we have operating at local government level. Voters cast separate ballots for PR and ward councillors, and the overall proportionality is determined by parties' shares of both the ward and the PR votes combined. So the the percentage of the vote that a party receives in both the ward elections and the PR elections is calculated, is combined and calculated, and that percentage is what they get in the council. There are 4 different statutes that govern local government elections. The Electoral Act number 73 of 1998, the Local Government Municipal Structures Act of 1998 that was amended in 2021, the Local Government Municipal Electoral Act of 2000, and the Local Government Municipal Systems Act of 2000. The most important ones as far as the elections go, and I think for your interest, are the Municipal Structures Act and the Municipal Electoral Act. The Municipal Systems Act deals far more with the administration aspect of municipalities. The electoral system determines, as I've said, the seat distribution for the different municipal spheres. We have 3 types of municipality. We have category A, which are metropolitan councils. We have category B, which are local municipalities. And we have category C, which are district municipalities. All local municipalities exist within a district municipality. And so for people that vote in local municipalities, they get 3 ballot papers. They get a ballot paper for their ward councillor. They get a ballot paper for the PR portion of the local government of the local municipality, and then they get a PR ballot for the district municipality. We currently have 8 metropolitan councils, 205 local municipalities, and 44 district municipalities. And so what that means is that the local government election this year is going to be 4,725 separate elections. There'll be elections for the 8 metro councils. There's the elections for the 205 local councils, the elections for the 44 district councils, and then the elections for the 4,468 ward councillors. So there are 4,725 separate ballots that will be printed, types of ballot that will be printed for this election. And so this means that local government elections are hugely complex. It's a huge logistical undertaking. The IEC uses the most amount of personnel and other resources for a local government election. And so it's the second biggest type of election that the IEC runs. The biggest elections that the IEC runs are the school governing body elections. The IEC runs all school governing body elections. But because of just the immense logistical and operational undertaking of doing local government elections, it's a huge job for the IEC, and I can understand why the IEC has been quite reticent and quite concerned about its ability to undertake this huge logistical challenge under COVID conditions. Let's remember that the IEC successfully had by-elections postponed, I think on 8 different occasions, at the Electoral Court.
Dr. Mbete, you've muted yourself.
Really? Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Where was I? I was saying, did you guys get me when I said that the IEC, because of the logistical undertaking of running elections, I can understand why they were sort of reticent to have the elections this year. The IEC has, they successfully last year, over the past year, had by-elections postponed by the Electoral Court, and they've only run by-elections under level 1 COVID restrictions. Because the argument is that under level 1 there's far more freedom of movement and larger gatherings that are allowed, which makes their job easier. So that's just to explain how big the election is. And so that means to you as media that will be covering this, that there's potential for many different stories, and there's potential to have quite large reach over many different types of community of councils over this elections. So I just want to explain briefly and kind of as simply as I possibly can, how the results are calculated. And I'm doing this, I always think that it's worth people who are behind the scenes, you all as journalists to know and to be able to understand how the results are calculated so that you can communicate it to the general public simply, but also so that you can, so that you've got the kind of background understanding around what the intricacies may be of coalitions and the different councils that are put together. This became very important, I think, at the 2011 elections. I remember 2011 being in the results center and everybody now scrambling to find out all these different things about the calculations, because suddenly it was clear that the elections were going to be really close in many municipalities and that they were going to be coalitions. So in this example comes straight from the IEC website, and the example that is used is of a council with 50,000 registered voters, and there are 21 seats available in this council. The valid votes that are cast at both ward and PR are 42,000. So 42,000 valid votes are cast in this election. And the votes for parties, 35,000 of the votes that are cast go to parties, both ward and PR. And for independents, remember independent candidates only run at ward level. So the votes for independents that are cast are 7,000 votes. Okay. Now, sorry. Am I still audible? Okay, good. The local councils, there is 20, so in this particular council, there are 21 council seats. 50% of those seats go to ward councillors, 50% of those go to PR councillors. So the way that this is divided and rounded up is that 11 of the seats go to ward councillors and 10 of the seats go to PR councillors. Now, if we look at the ward elections, there are 11 wards in this municipality. So there are 11 elections that take place at ward level. And 11 ward candidates win the elections. 7 of the ward candidates, 7 of the winners of wards come from political parties. 4 of them are independent candidates. Okay. So the 4 independents have won their wards. Great. Happy for them. We park them. Well done. Now we are concerned about the 7 candidates that come from the political parties. There are 5 parties in our imaginary municipality. Party A wins 1 ward seat. Party B wins 2 wards. Party C wins 2 wards. Party D wins 1 ward. and Party E wins 1 ward. Okay. And so that's how the 7 wards that are won by political parties are distributed. Now, if we go to the PR elections in this municipality, we're going to assume that this is a metro municipality. So there's no district vote. So the PR elections, 5 political parties submitted proportional representation lists, and Party A won 5,300 votes out of the 35,000. Party B won 7,700 votes. Party C, which is the most popular party in this municipality, won 8,900 votes. Party D won 8,100 votes. And Party E won 5,000 votes. Okay. Now, the conversion of the votes to seats is done using a quota formula. There's all sorts of different formulas that could be used. We use this one. It's the Droop formula. It's the Droop quota is what it's called. And so the way that is calculated is that a quota is taken that is made up of the total votes for all parties, including ward and PR, is divided by the total number of seats minus independents. So it's 35,000 divided by 17 plus 1. And the quota then is 2,059. Right? And what you do is that when you make that calculation, you get a fraction. The result that you get is a fraction. You disregard the fraction. So what you would you round it up. So if you divide 35,000 by 17 and you add 1, you get 2,059.82353. You disregard the 82353. Okay, the 0.82353. And then what you do is so this is step 7. To work out the total party seats, there are 17 seats available to political parties, right? You divide the total number of seats, the total number of votes that a party won by the quota, which is 2,059. So Party A, 5,300 divided by 2,059 equals 2.57. Party B, 7,700 divided by 2,059 equals 3.74. Party C, 8,900 divided by 2,059 equals 4.32. Party D, 8,100 divided by 2,059 is 3.93. And Party E, 5,000 divided by 2,059 is 2.43. And so that allows you to make your first round of allocations. And how you do that is that you take the whole number to make your first round of allocations. So you disregard the fraction. The first round of allocations, Party A gets 2 seats. Party B gets 3 seats. Party C gets 4 seats. Party D gets 3 seats. And Party E gets 2 seats, right? And then you have a remainder. In the case of Party A, you've got 0.57. In the case of Party B, you've got 0.74. Party C, you've got 0.32. Party D, 0.93. And Party E, 0.43. And what you do is then you rank the size of the remainders. Who has the largest remainder? Party D with 0.93, so that's number 1. Who has the second largest remainder? Party B with 0.74, so that's number 2. Who has the third largest remainder? Party E, which gets a rank of number 3. So in your second allocation, you divide the leftover seats. So you, after the first allocation, you allocated 14 seats and there were 3 left over. So in your second allocation, you allocate the leftover seats to the 3 highest ranking. Because there's 3 leftover seats, you allocate those seats to the 3 parties with the largest remainders. So Party A gets 1 seat, Party B gets 1, and Party D gets 1. And so what that means is that the final calculation, the final allocation of seats, is that Party A gets 3 seats, Party B gets 4 seats, Party C gets 4 seats, Party D gets 4 seats, and Party E gets 2 seats. And so that is the total that you calculate out of that 17 available seats for the PR candidates. Now, in order to restore the proportionality, to make sure that the parties get the amount of seats that they're actually meant to achieve, you then need to calculate the PR list seats by separating, by minusing the ward seats that a party has won from the total party seats that it is eligible for. So, from the total party seats that it has won from the PR vote. So, Party A, the 3 that it has been allocated from the total party vote from that 35,000, minus the 1 ward seat that it's won, means that it's got 2 PR seats. B has 2 PR seats. C, it's 4 minus 2, has 2. D has 3 PR seats, and Party E has 1 PR seat. So there are 10 PR seats that are allocated to the different parties. So the final results for this imaginary council is that the independents have the 4 wards that they've won. Party A has 1 ward councillor and it has 2 PR councillors. So 2 of its councillors come from its party list. Party B has 2 ward councillors and 2 councillors from the party list. Party C has 2 ward councillors and 2 PR councillors. Party D has 1 ward councillor and 3 PR councillors. Party E has 1 ward councillor and 1 PR councillor, and that then gives you the total of the 11 wards and the 10 PR. This, I know it's hugely complicated, but this dynamic between the way in which the PR seats are calculated and then are calculated from the total party vote and the number of wards that it gets, can lead to quite a lot of controversy. So that was one of the controversies around Nelson Mandela Bay municipality, where the ANC won the vast majority of wards. But because of the calculation of its total percentage of votes in Nelson Mandela Bay, and the way then that the PR seats were allocated to the ANC. The ANC was allocated fewer PR seats relative to the DA, and so that's one of the things that swung Nelson Mandela Bay in such a way that the DA then was able to form a coalition government in that first government in in the DA in Nelson Mandela Bay in 2016. And so this intricacy of how the PR seats are calculated after all the ward seats have been won, after all the wards have been won, is often one of the sources of controversy and of contestation or contention when results are being calculated. And so when there is some disagreement, not of actual counting at the ward level, but once there's disagreement about how the council seats are allocated, it will probably be because of a contestation around how this formula operates. Okay. Any questions at this stage before I continue? That's the end of the technical mathsy stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea for us to pause and take questions, comments. Nothing. There must be something. Okay, I just wanted to say that I'm quite intrigued by the fact that the link between the IEC and the governing bodies in schools, that for me is so fascinating.
Yeah.
And something I didn't know. So really nice new lesson. Diane, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to know if Dr. Mbete took standard grade or higher grade maths to be able to figure out all of these calculations. It sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. I was a bit of a cheat. I dropped higher grade and took standard grade maths, so I get an A. So I got like 92% for standard grade maths instead of the 60% for higher grade.
But on a serious note, you did mention that some of that information, did you say it's on the IEC's website?
On the IEC's website, yeah. And look, and I think that for you guys, the most important thing, the biggest relevance that those calculations have to you is if there is a contestation about the allocation of seats once the results come out. So if there is a fight about or questions about how seats are allocated in different municipalities, it is likely to be around the way in which those calculations are done. So, it's not something that you're going to need to know in the ordinary course of things. I see, Andiswa, your hand is up.
Do we have Andiswa? Did we lose her? Trisha? Andiswa is there, sorry.
I'm sorry, Katie. I didn't unmute. Apologies. Thank you, Dr. Mbete, for the presentation. I just wanted to check, what is the difference between a ward councillor and a PR councillor? Because I always thought it was one of the same thing.
Oh, no, okay. So our local government election system, one of the big questions about the local government system when the constitution was being negotiated was about the constitutional negotiators were very conscious about wanting to create a direct link between political representatives and the community at local government level. So the Constitution explicitly sets out, in respect to local government, and this is the difference between the local government part of the Constitution and the national and provincial part of the Constitution. So for the national and provincial systems, all the Constitution says is that the results of elections must result generally in proportionality. But it doesn't prescribe an electoral system. In the local government section of the Constitution is far more explicit about the requirement to have some kind of constituency representation at local government level. But still that the overall result must be proportional. And so that is why at local government level we have this mixed system where it's a mix of constituency representation, so direct representation of a particular constituency, and that's the ward elections. So the ward councillors are meant to be direct representatives of a particular community or a particular constituency. And then the PR portion is to achieve the Constitution's requirement for overall proportionality. But what it is also meant to achieve is that according to the principles governing elections and representation that were selected for our country during CODESA negotiations, was the idea that you need to have as broad representation as possible within your legislative bodies, so that as much of the population as possible can feel represented in legislatures by the elected representatives. So having the proportional representation component is to ensure that there is proportional representation of all different communities, all different races, religions or cultures in the diversity of South African society. Because if you only had constituency representation at local government level, then it would be and you only had constituency representation through this first past the post system, then it would be the majority rule, right? So if in a constituency that is predominantly ANC, it would, and if all wards in a council are predominantly ANC, then the ANC would run councils, would win 90%, 95% of a council. And what that would do also is that it would reinforce, because our ward boundaries in many ways reinforce apartheid spatial planning, because the constituencies that are demarcated by wards are still mostly within the residential areas that were demarcated to certain races under apartheid. So that's why in Parkhurst, where I live, the councillor is a DA councillor. It's always been a DA councillor because it's a predominantly white area. In Orlando West Extension, where my grandfather lives, the councillor is generally an ANC councillor, always been an ANC councillor because of the demographic of people that live there. And so having that proportional representation aspect is meant to control for or to mitigate those kinds of divisions in our society. So the PR portion is the proportional representation councillors are elected from lists that the parties devise, and they devise as they want to, closed party lists. And so the councillors that are on the PR list don't represent a particular constituency. They don't represent a particular community. They represent a political party. And they are and their place on the list is decided by the party bosses, similar to what we have at national and provincial level, right? And so ward councillors are meant to represent actual communities and actual constituencies. PR councillors represent so ward councillors represent, when I say actual, I mean a real life community within a bounded area. They represent geographical communities. That's what I mean. Whereas PR councillors represent party constituencies. They represent the political party broadly in that particular area. Does that make sense? And is that answering your question?
Yes, it does, but I wanted to find out then, I'm
not sure if you're muted still, so...
No, can you hear me now?
Okay, or you can just write in the chat if that is answering your question.
I think it is answering my question.
So that's the difference between ward councillors and PR councillors. And look, and the idea is that ward councillors are meant to... even ward councillors from the same, ward councillors are meant to be putting on the council, yes. I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
But you wanted to ask, can a ward councillor...
Dr. Mbete, I think we're losing you. I don't know if I'm the only one. But you're
okay,
kind
let me
of coming
just say this while Andiswa is getting back online. But the idea of...
Dr. Mbete, I'm going to interrupt you there. Apologies. We're struggling to hear you. Your signal's gone really bad.
Theory... It's supposed to mean that the ward councillors
Okay. Doc, I think we've lost you completely
I don't
now.
think that she's hearing us at all. Or there's a delay or something.
Oh, hang on. She's calling me. Give me 1 sec. Hi, Doc. No worries. We'll wait for you. Okay. Bye. Okay. We've lost her, but she's rejoining and she will hopefully be back with us in a few minutes. Everyone okay so far? Everyone finding this useful, helpful, informative?
Yes, it's very informative.
Good. Thank you. And a little overwhelming, actually. Diane made a good point. What was it, Bongi?
I just need that higher grade maths lessons to count the seed.
We need a hire mathematician.
I didn't even do that well. I'm a words person, not for numbers.
Yeah.
I would, Diane.
That's Dudu in the background, by the way.
I would, Diane. I would.
Simple percentages I can understand, but once you start getting into PR candidates and all of that, that's a lot.
I think I must start introducing those in the numbers. Ne? I think I must start introducing those in the numbers.
Is it possible
the name?
Is it possible for her to explain just briefly the PR counselor was what counselor? Just like a one-liner again, because I got a bit lost for a moment.
No, I'm sure Corinda will ask her as soon as she comes back. Absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Oh, I'm wondering exactly what's happening with her signal. Shame. Must be completely down. Yeah, Zane, I've just seen your message. Informative and lots of story ideas. I'm also loving the story ideas. The potential ideas coming through. So no cameras on then, guys? No one's putting a camera on?
I think it's safe that way. Just a quick question. Did she explain how PR seats are counted, the number from a district to a local municipality and a metro? Or she hadn't gone to that yet? Because I think it's important. It goes into the heart of Andy Swall's question in terms of how the PR seats work out.
Hi, Boo. I think she did. I think she did, and if I'm not mistaken, that's why Diane was asking her which mathematics grade she did, whether it's high or standard. It was a bit, a story.
No, I think that was the allocation in terms of how they're allocated, but not the number as to how many PR seats are available in a particular municipality and how you get to that point as to the actual number, not the proportion of the percentage of the. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think she did explain, she did say there are 10 PR seats that are allocated to a municipality.
No, I think we need to go back to that question.
Okay.
I think she said most of the information is available on the IEC website.
Can I also ask that in the meantime we post all our questions on the open chat so that we don't lose them?
Thanks, Doc. We'll hear from you. Bye. So Google Chrome crashed and it's just being reloaded. So Dr. Mbete will be back with us shortly, I hope.
Shouldn't we take like a 5-minute comfort break?
Yes, let's use the opportunity. Thanks, Boo. Yeah. 5-minute break, everyone. We'll be back at 10:02, 9:02.
Hello, I'm back on my phone. I don't know what's going on with my computer. My Google Chrome crashed and now Safari is not wanting to do anything. Sorry about that.
Great. So happy to have you back. Don't worry about it.
No problem. I think that what I'm going to do, Loretta, I'm going to send you my presentation so that you can project it, please. And then I'll speak to it from there. Let's see here. Let me send you.
We've got two hands up as well when you have a moment.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to finish the thought that I had around the elections, which were around the difference between ward and PR councillors. The idea, at least in theory, is supposed to be that ward councillors really represent the community, right? As it is. Hold on, let's see. I'm being allowed to. So that ward councillors really represent the community. They really represent issues that ordinary people are facing, and that they bring those issues to light in the council. So whether that's about electricity, potholes, water sanitation, whatever. And then PR councillors are meant to be far more concerned with and involved with kind of strategic matters, directions that come from political parties. Now, what that often means is that ward councillors are often marginalized in council meetings. Many of the ward councillors also, that being a ward councillor is a part-time job, so it's not remunerated at the same level as a PR councillor. And so what that often does is that it then builds in kind of a seniority of PR councillors over ward councillors, and you often find that in many executive executive committees of councils, the members of the executive committee are PR councillors, and often the mayor is a PR councillor, because the mayor is elected from the executive committee, and you often have then PR councillors becoming mayors and not ward councillors becoming mayors. And so this kind of hierarchy that we see between ward councillors and PR councillors in councils often then means that it has an implication for independents who win wards. That's why you often see that that independent candidates don't have as much sway in councils as political party representatives. But also you see that ward councillors generally and the particular issues that they are concerned with get marginalized in councils very often.
Just a follow-up question. Can you field the same individual as a ward councillor and a PR, or those are two completely different individuals?
No. So you're only supposed to, if you're fielding a ward councillor, that ward councillor is only meant to be registered as a ward councillor, and then PR councillors are registered on the PR list. And so that's
Corinda. Oh, sorry, Dr. Mbete. Apologies.
So the other consequence of that, of course, is that political parties will then field the candidate that they want to win the most. They will field as a PR councillor, not as a ward councillor.
Corinda, you had a question before we lost Dr. Mbete. Do you want to ask that quickly?
Oh, I think it's been
answered for your question. Has it been answered?
It's been answered. It's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Trisha?
Hi, everyone. So, my question is, in your opinion, when you look at the technical aspect of it when it comes to voting, which is the most controversial ward, district, or municipality? You've mentioned Nelson Mandela Bay, but I want to know which others, in your opinion.
Look, I think that at this stage, many of them are. So, I mean, Nelson Mandela Bay, Knysna, and Beaufort West. A lot of the small Knysna, Beaufort West, Kannaland, in the Western Cape. A bunch of the ones in KZN, Jozini, comes to mind immediately. And then of course I think all the Gauteng metros, and Nelson Mandela Bay, are often the most contested. And the reason why, often is because of the, so like Jozini has had, there's been this, it's mostly an IFP dominated municipality, but the ANC won enough seats. I think it was one of the only coalitions in 2011, and so those municipalities where there isn't a single political party that can dominate both at both the ward level and also the PR level is generally where you're going to get those kinds of contestations.
Okay, thank you.
Trisha's hand is up.
We just answered my question.
Okay, great. Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Perfect. Lerato, can I ask you to go to slide 4, I think? Okay, no, slide 5. Okay, so just a point here around voter registration. Now, the Constitutional Court made it very explicit that voter registration should be reopened, and so what it did is that it declared the election proclamation of the 3rd of August as invalid and unconstitutional. And it did so. Now, because we haven't seen a judgment from the court from the 3rd of September, we've just seen this order. So we can't see the reasoning for that. But at least what we can conclude from the order that the Constitutional Court made is that it found that it was very important for the registration weekends that were cancelled in July to be made up. In order to fulfill Section 19(3)(a) of the Constitution, which says that every adult citizen has the right to vote in elections for any legislative body established in terms of the Constitution and to do so in secret. So in order to fulfill the ability of citizens to vote and for the most amount of citizens to be able to vote, the Constitutional Court said that you need to have a registration drive before this election. And this is important, as I've said, because for local government elections, you can only vote in the voting station that you're registered in. And so the voter registration weekend will be on the 18th to the 19th of September, and it's intended for the registration of new voters, but also to enable registered voters to change their details and to update their registration details, whether that is to update their addresses, etc. You can update your registration details online. I put up the link, and this presentation, now that it's shared with Lerato, it will be shared with all of you. And so it is possible to update your registration details yourself online. It's also possible to register online. And so I do think that is something that to publicize as much as possible on your platforms, that people should take the opportunity to register to vote. Registration is open now. You can register at any municipality. You can as a walk-in, or you can register online. Or you can register then at the all the voting stations will be open for voting this weekend. All 23,000 and something voting stations will be open for people to go vote in, to go register in, and that is going to be open until the registration will close for voters on the 21st of September when the election is proclaimed. So the voters' roll is closed when the election is proclaimed. So the voters' roll was closed on the 3rd of August when the election was proclaimed. The Constitutional Court has said that election proclamation is invalid, and so now the voters' roll is open again until the 21st of September. Next slide. I just want to show you here the registration statistics. So we have about 25,600,000, and these statistics I got these on the 2nd of September. So the numbers may have shifted slightly, but basically 25,653,344 people are registered, and we've got and I've got there the distribution. I particularly want to highlight the 18 to 19 age group, where only 43,210 of them are currently registered to vote. And I think there are 2 million something people in that age group. So it's a very small proportion of them are registered to vote. The bulk of the age group of people who are registered to vote is the 32 to 39. And that's also the bulk of the people of the age. It's the age group that mostly turns out to vote as well. I want to just highlight the difference between the number of men who are registered and females and women who are registered to vote. 14,167,588 women registered to vote, and women turn out at a rate higher than the turnout for men. It's 55% of women women make up 55% of registered voters, and often make up around 55, sometimes even more. I think in the 2019 election it was like 57% of voter turnout. And that to me is significant because you've got women participate as voters at a higher rate, more than men do. But you wouldn't say that in terms of which voters are interviewed in the media. Media Monitoring Africa, every election, Media Monitoring Africa and GenderLinks do it as well, where at every election they monitor the gender the gender profile of all the political parties, but also of who the media speaks to. So which candidates the media speaks to, and which voters the media speaks to. And men are represented at a far higher rate than women are, both as candidates and as voters. And that male voters are spoken to more than female voters is particularly, I think, problematic if you look at the fact that women vote more than men do. And so something to be aware of for you guys. Next slide. Can candidate registration is the big issue of contention now. So the candidate registration was closed on the 23rd of August. So the election proclaimed on the 3rd, candidate registration closed on the 23rd. The ANC failed to put up candidates, I think, in over 90 municipalities. It then put an application into the Electoral Court for the reopening of the candidate registration process. And it withdrew that application on the 31st of August. Now, I know there's Helen Zille's thing that they withdrew the application because they knew what the Constitutional Court was going to say. I have it on good record from a number of advocates that they found it really difficult to get somebody to represent them because they had no case in law. They missed the registration date. They missed it. And they couldn't prove that there was anything with the IEC systems that prevented them from being able to register their candidates. And so when the Constitutional Court ruled that the election must take place, on the 6th of September, the IEC announced that it was going to reopen candidate registration after the voter registration weekend. And so basically they've interpreted, this is based on an interpretation of the Municipal Electoral Act. So the argument for reopening is that the Municipal Electoral Act provides for candidate registration to take place after the proclamation of an election and the closure of the voters' roll. So the Constitutional Court, by invalidating the 3rd of August election proclamation, has opened the opportunity for candidate registration to take place because a new election date is going to need to be proclaimed. And in terms of the Municipal Electoral Act, the process after an election is proclaimed, then candidate registration takes place before a date that is set by the Electoral Commission. Now, the argument against the reopening is that the Constitutional Court order makes it explicit that the electoral timetable that the IEC developed before the court case at the Constitutional Court. The argument of the Constitutional Court said that timetable remains in place with whatever amendments the IEC needs to make to allow for voter registration. And so the argument then is that if the court had intended for candidate registration to be reopened, it would have explicitly said so, in the same way it explicitly said that voter registration must be opened. And so the argument here is that the IEC is misinterpreting the Constitutional Court order. And that is what the DA is taking them to the Constitutional Court. That's the application that they're making, and I believe the EFF as well. We'll see who wins. Of course, the real difficulty of this and around this interpretation is that we didn't receive a judgment from the court. We just received an order. And so it's difficult to know what the court's reasoning was in making the order that it did. Next slide. Politically, why this matters for the I think, for the country or for the ANC is that the ANC, in its failure to register candidates, it's pretty big lapses. So didn't register any PR councillors in the Western Cape. Only registered PR councillors in 3 of the municipalities in KZN. Didn't register PR councillors in 9 of the Limpopo municipalities. Didn't register any PR councillors in Mirafong, local municipalities in Gauteng. And the argument, the excuse or whatever that was given for not registering PR councillors in Mirafong is that they confused Mirafong and Midvaal, which indicates that, and Midvaal is the DA-run municipality, which seemed to be an admission that they were willing to let Midvaal go. But Mirafong is an ANC-run council. And so it's absurd to me that they wouldn't have registered PR votes then. And what that would mean is that it would be the first election since 1994 where the ANC wouldn't be competing in every single ward in the country, where it wouldn't be competing nationally. And to just give you an idea of how significant that is, this year in 2021 is the first election where the DA is putting up a candidate in every ward in the country, in all 4,700 or 4,400 and something wards. The ANC has, over the past 27 years, been the only political party with the capacity, both in terms of human resources and financial resources, and just geographic reach. It's been the only political party that could put up candidates in every ward in the country. And contest every municipality in the country. So not contesting was pretty significant in this way. And what that would mean, given what I've explained about PR, about the difference in kind of status or significance of ward councillors versus PR councillors, what that would mean is that where the ANC hadn't put up any PR candidates, it was unlikely to win a mayoral seat because mayors are always PR candidates, and it would be unlikely to have an influence over the decisions made in the council with just ward councillors. Next slide. Okay. So just to explain to you why that is important, I just want to delve a bit into the structure of the municipality. So the municipality is made up of the council, which is the legislature. It's made the mayor and the municipal administration. Now, because South Africa has, at all 3 levels of government, we have a parliamentary system. Even though we call our president a president, we don't have a presidential system like the United States or other countries on the continent, like Namibia or Ghana or Zimbabwe. The main unit, at least in theory, written down in the Constitution, the primary unit for our politics and our and decision making is meant to be the legislature, whether that legislature is the National Assembly or a provincial legislature or a council. And so that is why we vote for legislators. We don't vote for the president directly. We don't vote for a premier directly. We don't vote for a mayor directly. We vote for legislators. And then those legislators vote amongst themselves for the executive. So our executive at all 3 levels of government comes out of the legislature. And you see this most explicitly at provincial and at local government level. So the council, which is the set of people that are going to be elected from the wards and from the PR ballots, elect from amongst themselves a speaker for the council, and they elect a mayor. The council makes decisions on policies and bylaws. It passes budgets, and it decides on integrated development plans. So the council is enormously important for the governance of the municipality in terms of policy making and legislation. The mayor is elected by the council and appoints an executive or mayoral committee that is made up of councillors. And the mayor oversees the work of the municipal manager and the department heads. Metropolitan municipalities have an executive mayor who has far more authority over the operational aspects of a municipality. The municipal administration is headed by a municipal manager, and the municipal manager is responsible for employing staff to implement council programs. Now, often what we see as far as governance and governance issues and corruption goes is that it often comes from a blurring in the lines of authority between the mayor and the municipal manager. Especially, we see this especially in small municipalities and local municipalities where, because the mayor is the local kind of party boss or somebody very linked to party bosses, even though the mayor is at local municipality level, is supposed to have very little involvement in administration. What you often find is that the municipal manager that gets appointed at local level, you've had local municipalities that have very, at least on paper, competent municipal managers, technicians, technical people, but that because they are politically junior to the mayor, have very little autonomy and decision-making ability. And so mayors are able to control the appointment to the administration. They control the appointment of department heads. And they exercise a lot of control over the use of budgets. And so a lot of the issues that we see at local government level is because of that blurring of the political and the administrative interface, and the abuse, basically, of the political, of the senior political positions that people hold. Next slide. So, local government responsibilities and powers. So when we talk about local government, and I know, and in South Africa, it's always, I think, it's been this way since since the first election, local government election in 2000, is that we often end up adjudicating or contesting national issues in local government elections. And so, like in the 2016 local government election, that election was effectively a referendum of Jacob Zuma's leadership of the ANC, that election was voters speaking about their dissatisfaction with corruption and all of and the Gupta stuff and all of that kind of thing. So and even the way that media reports on elections. Sorry, I've got dogs going crazy outside. Even the way that the media reports on elections, even at local government election, the emphasis is often on national level stuff, right? So, the big national level corruption, what's happening with different political parties. And what that does is that it means that there's not a lot of focus on what local government's actually responsible for. So local government responsibilities are electricity delivery, water for household use, sewage and sanitation, storm water systems, refuse removal, firefighting, municipal health services, decisions around land use, and this is a very important one. So zoning is a municipal competency, and because of that, then the relationship between municipalities and property developers is always a significant watch. The city of Cape Town, many of the origins of corruption in the city of Cape Town come from the relationship with developers. So much of the corruption in the city of Cape Town is around property developers. And property developers are very significant sources of income for the DA in Cape Town. And sources of funding, basically. And often a lot of the tension is around the relationship between the developers and city officials and city politicians. The municipal roads, so the potholes, municipalities' problem, municipal public transport, so bus services, one of the big tensions and a contestation between national government and metropolitan municipalities has been that metros want to have control over PRASA, over passenger rail. Metros don't have control of passenger rail. And I know the city of Cape Town used to fight quite a lot, has, lobbied quite a lot around this, that they want to have control of passenger rail, within Cape Town, so that they can manage it, and so that they can also integrate it with other city transport systems. But there's been a feeling that because they don't have control over it, they're basically subject to PRASA's functioning or dysfunction, and that then has an impact on the city economy, or on the municipal economy, which municipal governments are also responsible for. Street trading, abattoirs and fresh food markets, parks and recreational areas, libraries and other public facilities, local tourism, and increasingly metropolitan municipalities have more and more responsibility for human settlements. And that has been reinforced through jurisprudence. A lot of court cases over the past 15 years have reinforced the responsibility of cities to make sure that people have housing, that people have shelter. And so the cases that have been brought against cities for evictions and that kind of thing, the courts have repeatedly said that it is the responsibility of the city government to make sure that people have alternative shelter. And so this relationship between, so even though human settlements as a whole is a national competence, because human settlements is reliant on municipalities for water and sanitation, for electricity, and for refuse, you can't the national government can't make decisions around RDP housing, for example, without municipalities. And you've seen a lot more responsibility for human settlements being passed down to metros in particular. The powers that municipalities have, they can pass bylaws, and a bylaw is a local law and regulation. And the bylaws may not contradict or overrule any national laws. So that is why there's then a whole lot of contestation and moves to challenge, like the DA's plans for bylaws on homelessness, for example, and on homeless people. And the reason why there's scope to then challenge those at the High Court and then going up to the Constitutional Court is that they go against people argue that they go against the Constitution, but also the precepts that are in national law. The local governments have powers to approve budgets and developmental plans, and in particular the integrated development plans, which each municipality is supposed to pass every year in consultation with the people of the municipality. Municipalities impose rates and taxes, property taxes, and that is a very important source of income. And it makes, and the municipality's ability to impose rates and to also charge service fees for water, electricity, libraries, and to also impose fines, like traffic fines and everything, means that municipalities have the power of independent revenue generation in a way that provinces don't. Provinces have very little revenue generating power. So provinces get their budget allocations from national government. Municipalities get a portion of their budgets from national government, but they have the power to generate their own revenue, which is why metropolitan municipalities are often wealthier or are often richer than the provinces that they are within. This certainly is the case for Gauteng. The 3 metro municipalities in Gauteng are richer than the province of Gauteng. They have larger budgets, they have more revenue than the province of Gauteng. And it then creates some kind of tension between the municipal, the metro governments and the provincial governments, because very often the metros will resist some of the efforts of provincial governments to limit what they do or to exercise oversight, because they're basically like, who are you? We're richer than you, and we should have the ability to make certain decisions if we can afford it. And you can see that kind of tension play out. You saw it play out a lot over the last 5 years between Gauteng province and the city of, particularly the city of Tshwane under the DA, but you also saw it play out against the city of Tshwane in Johannesburg. But you also even see it when the province and the city are governed by the same party. So you saw it play out often in the Western Cape, with tensions between the Western Cape and the city of Cape Town. Because of the tensions between Helen Zille and Patricia de Lille. So municipalities then can also borrow money, and that's why our metro municipalities have an independent credit rating to the nation, to the state, to the sovereign. And so for a long time, until earlier this year, the metro municipalities had better credit rating than the South African, than the national government. I mean, the metros have been downgraded, but they still overall have a better overall credit rating to the state, to the sovereign, and they can borrow money independently. Any questions at this point about what we've done so far?
I'm just checking that Trisha and Andiswa's hands are old hands, because I see them on my screen.
Yes, they're old hands. I don't know how to remove it.
Okay.
Mine is a new hand.
Go for it, Andiswa.
I just wanted to check, can you explain the difference, with the municipal elections and the by-law elections? I understand that sometimes when a ward councillor passes away or resigns, there should be by-law elections. I just want to check the difference between the two and why we hold more bylaws than municipal elections, local government
Okay.
elections.
All right. So just a correction, it's a by-election. So the
Yes,
by-law...
by-election.
Yes, so the by-law is the law that is our local laws. The by-election is an election that takes place when a municipal seat, when a ward seat is vacated in between elections, so within the municipal term. Municipal terms are 5 years, so that's why you have 5 years between elections. In that time in between, if a ward seat is vacated for some reason, a ward councillor dies, a ward councillor leaves or resigns from their party, a ward councillor is fired from their party, is expelled, or a ward council decides to move to a different party. Whatever the situation is, that leads to a ward seat being vacated, then that triggers a by-election. And a by-election should take place within 90 days of that seat being vacated. So last year when the IEC was asking for the postponement of all those by-elections, it was because it wasn't sure it would be able to have by-elections within that 90 days. Now, and we've seen in the past 5 years how by-elections can swing the balance of power within a council. So I know I said that in practice, there's been this sort of difference of status between ward councillors and PR councillors. But with all of the coalition governments that we've had in different municipalities, we've seen ward councillors suddenly gain all sorts of power because they can literally become the kingmakers and they can swing elections. So, for example, in city of Johannesburg, with the changes in the DA and DA government, what you've seen is that especially in coloured and Indian areas, that where the DA had won seats, had won wards before, those ward councillors, so the most prominent example this year was in Eldorado Park, where the ward councillor was a community activist, right? Very well known and well loved in the community. And he ran for election in 2016 on a DA ticket and won in the ward. And then with all the changes and all the things that have been, all the drama that's been going on within the DA, increasingly felt abandoned, alienated by the new leadership of the party, and decided to leave the DA and join the Patriotic Alliance. And so his leaving the DA triggered a by-election, and a new election took place, and he retained his seat He was voted back into power as a community activist. People love him, so people voted for him again. And in this case, people were voting for him as an individual. They weren't voting for a political party necessarily. So people vote for him again. And so that seat went to the Patriotic Alliance. So the Patriotic Alliance went from having 1 seat in the Johannesburg Council to having 2 seats in the Johannesburg Council. And that enabled, and so that then has really, it's doubled the Patriotic Alliance's influence in the council. The Patriotic Alliance's influence in the council has increased by 100%. And it has also, it then gave the Patriotic Alliance an additional seat to negotiate with the parties that wanted to run the city of Johannesburg. And so the Patriotic Alliance lent its vote, its 2 votes to the ANC to enable the ANC to become the government of the city of Johannesburg. You've seen much in some of the municipalities in the Western Cape. You've seen these big swings in control in support and in control of a municipality at by-election time because of a ward candidate or ward councillor leaving one party and going to another party. Beaufort West, you saw a lot of that. Knysna, you saw that. I think in Knysna, it's the one where where one of the councillors went from being went from the DA to the ANC. It was some jump like that. Kaneland is another place where you've seen that kind of movement. And so that's where by-elections get significant for the governance of a particular municipality. So the local government elections are the elections that are set, that need to happen every 5 years. The by-elections are the elections that happen in between those elections to fill a ward seat.
All clear. Thank you so much. And thank you for also clarifying the issue with the reopening of the candidate registration. It was all confusing, but I think I'm very clear.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, I saw Diane's hand.
Yes, hi there, Doctor. So, earlier on you had mentioned how, there was a significant focus in the previous election coverage on national issues. But I wanted to ask you whether you think, whether to what extent voters do consider national issues taking place at a party level when actually considering voting, because I don't know if they can be completely separated out. Of course, there are these areas which local government is responsible for, but isn't there are there not some areas where there's also some overlap, particularly when it comes to the perception of the party whose candidate you are being asked to vote for?
Definitely, there are areas of overlap, right? There are very many significant areas of overlap. I suppose the question is where do you place emphasis in that overlap? For example, issues around Eskom and electricity, and the countries like electricity stability and everything are also a very important local government issue, right? So in, why am I forgetting the name now? In Mfuleni municipality, where the municipality has not paid Eskom and owes Eskom a huge amount of money, which then impacts on citizens, on the different households, ability to access electricity, that's an overlapping issue, right? There's an issue about a failure there of municipality and the way a municipal government and how it has behaved, and then linked to kind of national policy and a state-owned enterprise, right? And issues, I think that there's a lot of relationship now between Eskom's plans for renewable energy, and that if you have let's say wind farms and you can get wind energy in your municipality, and you can buy, and if a municipality, the city of Cape Town's trying to do this, and has lobbied to do this quite a lot, is to buy for municipalities to buy electricity directly from independent power producers. And this would be a problem for Eskom because it reduces Eskom's revenue. But if they can buy directly from independent power producers, then that would solve a lot of the electricity issues that municipalities have. And so that is one of those, cross issues. But something like expropriation without compensation. Actually, I'm about to self-correct. Expropriation without compensation. Yes, there's a national issue that's going through national parliament. But in a place like in the city of Johannesburg, for example, one of the things that got Herman Mashaba into trouble with the DA is that in his plan and with the xenophobia associated with it, but in his plan for taking back the city of Johannesburg, one of the things that he had done is effectively, I think, pass a bylaw or I don't know if he did it officially through a bylaw or it was a particular policy that he wanted to implement as mayor, which would allow him to expropriate buildings with absentee landlords in the city of Johannesburg and then hand those buildings over to property developers who would be able to develop them to create low-cost rental housing stock that, of course, because it's Herman, would only be available to South Africans, but to then allow people that were living in informal settlements to move into that low-cost rental stock in the city centre. And he was using expropriations power, basically, to be able to do so. And so, so that, I suppose, would not be an example. But, I mean, so you can make the links, right, between national issues and local issues. I think the big thing is to just, place emphasis on the local issues and how people are going to be affected. Yes, I do think that people look at the national leadership of a political party in making decisions about the local candidates. But having said that, I think that we underestimate sometimes by focusing so much on what do people think about like Cyril Ramaphosa or what's happening with Carl Niehaus, right? And will that affect the ANC support or not? We then overlook the dynamics at local levels. So like in the city of Tshwane, for example, those community members that marched to the IEC and they said to the IEC, don't accept the candidate list that you're going to get from Luthuli House. Because the candidates that are on both the PR list that's been set up for Tshwane, but also the candidates that have been put in place for different wards are not who the communities want. And so that points to a whole dynamic around ANC politics at the local level that is probably not neatly divided between Cyril's faction or ACE's faction and JZ's faction. It's not neatly divided around RET versus not RET versus unity. It's a whole other type of dynamic that's going on in many local municipalities. And I think that we lose that color when we try to impose, or when we use the lens, or when we only use the lens of national political dynamics to try to understand what's happening at local level. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, 100.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I just want to say also is that one of the other things why that's important is because local level politics eventually does become provincial politics. I mean, provincial politics and then become national politics. So, Ace Magashule, Didi Mabuza, were local party bosses in 2000. So if we paid sort of enough attention to the dynamics of the local politics, in the Free State in Mpumalanga in 2000, and then tracked kind of what each of those people were doing over the 7 years leading to Polokwane, it would make their power over the last 10 years make a lot more sense, right? They didn't come out of nowhere. And local government is such an important place to mobilize and to build political influence, both for party politicians, for party politicians. And so that local government level is so important to keep watch on, to sort of be able to guess what like future trends could be. Any other questions? Loretta, please will you go to the last slide?
Hi, Doc. I have a question.
Yes.
Kupano? Yeah.
Kupano.
Thank you. You've sort of touched on it in what you've just spoken about now, and I think it's also following off of Diane's point about conflating national and local politics, or using local government sort of as a litmus test for what's going to happen at a national level. I wonder if you see that local government or local ward councillors and people in power at a local level use the fact that many South Africans confuse the issues between who's responsible at a national level and who's responsible at a local level to shirk their responsibilities and accountabilities. I mean, when we look at what you just presented now, we've had running stories this last week of people in the Northwest saying we want to see Ramaphosa here to solve their local municipality issues, and we have water concerns across all of us. Even Gauteng is going to have a water crisis now. And we often go, okay, well, it's a national problem, when actually it's fully in the scope of local government. And I wonder if even us as journalists are sort of partly responsible for conflating the issues between who is really responsible and how we can hold those people accountable. Because local government, I think another example I think of is with the car registrations. I mean, Jacob Mamabolo, to be honest, it is his responsibility to fix traffic and licensing in Gauteng, but when he didn't have a response, he got into trouble at national level for announcing something that is sort of in his purview. So I wonder if we also are guilty of that.
Totally, and I think that what happens now, look, when I was saying that ward councillors are, and theoretically the system is designed so that ward councillors can be directly accountable to a community and to directly accountable to voters. But often you find that ward councillors are the least accountable politicians in the system. And whether you find, so a ward councillor, to be able to be registered as a ward councillor for a particular ward, you're meant to live in that ward. And what you'll then find in like rural municipalities or in townships is that the ward councillor will register living in that ward, and then as soon as they are getting their 15,000 a month, they buy a house, they move to the suburbs, or in small towns they'll move into town, right? They'll buy a house in town from the rural area or from the township, and then they and they're never really accountable to the people that they govern. And then people get so frustrated, and so you want to go to, you tell it's like you tell their parents, right? You tell the national government, and so you want the president to come to tell this person to do their job, and you see the same thing with mayors, right? Where people get so frustrated with a mayor, and they want the president to come and tell them to do their job, even when the president's powers actually to tell that mayor what to do are limited. And I think that's, and so people people try to rely basically, and it's not an unreasonable expectation, on the hierarchy of political parties to enable certain governance outcomes to happen. And that is and I think that that's one of the things that then keeps the emphasis constantly on the national government, even though the local government is actually empowered to answer some of the questions and to make some of the decisions and influence some of the administrative things that people want them to. And I think that one of the other things is that because there's very little, there's community, and I think that's one of the importance actually of community media, of community radio stations, of small community newspapers, is to and the importance of having like a council beat, so in the big metros, having a journalist that goes and sits in council every once in a while and says what's actually happening here, because then there is the scrutiny, but local government councillors are so used to not being scrutinized that they get very used to not having to account to anyone, and so I think that is perhaps something to think about. Like the situation in Northwest, the town where Clover is, and where Clover then announced, the Clover factory and Clover announced that they are going to leave in Lichtenburg, and they said that no, we're going to close our factory and we're moving to a town in KZN, and then all of a sudden you see this provincial intervention. That local municipality has not been functioning for nearly 2 decades, and there hasn't been water. The roads are unusable, and then it has an impact on the functioning of economic activity, and how companies function, and then people now want the premier or the president to intervene, and those local bosses aren't held accountable. One of the other reasons is that those local bosses then become very important in something like the ANC elective conference. So Cyril won't want to antagonize too much the leaders in Lichtenburg municipality, because he needs those branches for the electoral conference in 2022. So the balance of power actually isn't always stronger on the side of the national government. It can actually be stronger on the side of the local government, of the local politicians, because of the kind of influence that they can have in party politics.
Where? I
Okay.
see a hand. And then Audrey.
Thanks, Katie. So at the back of that, then, Dr. Mbete, it sounds like then that some of those at municipal level may not necessarily not know the answer to the questions, like when you're asking them in terms of housing allocations and all of that, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you given people electricity? It may sound like even the national themselves may be confused, especially to Kopano's point, where Mbalula wants to be the one that makes the announcements on the renewals, when in fact it's at Jacob Mamabulo's level. It sounds to me like they may all sometimes want to outshine each other, which could also be a potential for confusion.
Totally. And look, the one thing that is, and it is very concerning, is that many of our politicians don't know what the division of labor should be. And many of them don't care to know because they want to shine, because they want to increase their prominence. And I think that the dynamic between Mamabulo and Mbalula is definitely illustrative of that. And yeah, so there's very often, don't take it for granted that our leaders, and especially political leaders, know what their constitutional responsibilities are, know what the legislation says about a particular thing. Very often they don't. And so that also, it's also one of the reasons why they'll then make promises about things that they actually can't fulfill. Because their own understanding of the intergovernmental system, of where certain responsibilities lie, is very limited. So I think that's one of the things that we see often. I think, Diane, is that your hand? I don't know who else is next. Katie, you can direct.
Sorry, I think Audrey was first.
Oh, Audrey.
Yeah, thanks. Have we lost Audrey? Or have I lost everyone?
No, we're still here.
No, we're still here, but I think Audrey's not saying anything, or she doesn't have...
Okay, oh, she's left, I see. There must be a signal issue. Who was next? Was it Kathy or was it you, Diane? Can we go to Kathy?
I think it was Diane first, Katie.
Okay, sorry, Diane?
Okay, so I just had a general point, not really a question for Dr. Mbete, but just to say that I think it will also just be very important for the team to just familiarize themselves with the local government section in the Constitution. The politicians don't often know the right things, as we saw in the Northwest with the ANC saying that they have replaced the Premier when the Premier can only actually be officially voted in the legislature, and then we thus saw that 2-week-long mess. So it is very important for us to actually go through those sections about what the processes are meant to be, terms of councils, all of that kind of stuff, because it does spell a lot of that out in the Constitution.
Definitely. Kathy?
All right. Hi, everyone. Dr. Mbete, I just wanted you to reflect a little bit for me. We're looking at such a crisis in terms of failures at a municipal level. And what we have seen are the different ways in which communities have actually taken matters into their own hands and going as far as the courts to be put in charge of administrating their own services. And I think that's a really important part of this election, especially when you talk about the fact that local government is about local issues. And so these are the issues that we are seeing happen more and more in different municipalities, and just kind of the role that is going to play in having these small parties at a local level who already know who they want to vote into power, and how that's likely also to mess around a little bit with the politics. But also we have a lot of municipalities that have been placed under administration. And there is a lot of tension that we find between administrators, between councillors, and responsibility. So often they pass the buck amongst each other of why has something not happened, why is this not happening, despite the fact that a municipality has been placed under administration. And just, what's your reflections on that? Because I think how we tell stories, even just a province like the Northwest, that's a province that's under administration, almost collectively. So, and the reality is that administrators also don't always work when they're put in place. And so how do we reflect that honestly without necessarily just kind of going for this has failed or this has been successful? Because I think it is quite complex.
Yes, definitely. Lerato, sorry, can you please put up slide 16, so the slide before this? And I want to just go, so I was just sort of thinking about some of the, issues I thought about might come up in the election, the legitimacy of it. Will it be fair and fair? Will it be a referendum on Ramaphosa's leadership? If Ramaphosa saved the ANC in 2019, will that gloss have worn off? I think it has, but will we see that in the election results? The pandemic response, is there a risk of it being a super spreader event? I actually think that is overstated. I don't think it will be, especially given the IEC sort of practice of different protocols. But I mean, yeah. But the collapse of small towns is critical in this election. So many small towns in South Africa have had their governance just collapsing. And so with some of those, we see them being placed under provincial administration. So in the Constitution, in the intergovernmental governance section of the Constitution, it sets out, it makes provision for municipalities to be placed under administration by provincial governments, and there are so many municipalities in that state across the country. So many of the local municipalities where because basically governance or being in charge of the municipality is given to the local party bosses who, as I then say, they become mayors. They either appoint their friends or unqualified people to be municipal managers, or in some ways, I think even worse, they appoint qualified people who, are well qualified to be municipal managers, and then they just ignore those people or sideline them. And those people then actually don't have power to make any decisions. And then you have, because of our other broader sort of economic challenges, where municipalities are the only economy, where government is the only economy in a particular place, and so that's the main source of jobs and who gets employment is determined not by their qualifications, but by their political alignment or who they're close to politically. And it has in many municipalities, and then there's many local municipalities that are actually just not viable entities. As I said before, what's supposed to happen is that the bulk of municipal revenue is supposed to be self-generated, right? Or a significant part of it is supposed to be self-generated. But in local municipalities where the majority of people are indigent, right, don't pay rates, in terms of law, don't have to pay rates, don't have to pay for electricity, don't have to pay for water, and where there's very little economic activity in terms of private business. Those municipalities are almost completely reliant on the National Treasury for their revenue, and are often just don't have the kind of money to provide the services that they should be providing, and so those municipalities then are basically just employment agencies. They just employ certain people, and you'll often find then the municipal managers or the mayors who want to compete with metro mayors who pay themselves very big salaries, but nothing else really is going on in that municipality. And so we've got a lot of, like in rural towns, where services have just collapsed, and they are, and water isn't provided, and electricity isn't provided, and the roads are barely drivable. And I think that really putting a spotlight on those places and on those issues, as Kathy says, and who then should be accountable for that, and is critical. It's so important, because we don't hear many of those stories, and we should. And so, so to Kathy's point, I agree completely about those, and the way in which local municipalities sort of shirk responsibility. I mean, the council of Emfuleni local municipality, which actually should be an incredibly rich municipality, because it's an industrial area. And so in terms of revenue, they have a lot of sources of revenue, but that place is just, the governance is just corrupt the whole way through. There's a lot of stories to be told from that place. And so, so I think that and there's and in many ways, I always say that if I were to go back into government, I'd want to go back to local government. I'd want to work in a city government. I think that there is such potential to have huge influence at a city government. I would never want to work in provincial. And we often have either the people that are in those positions not fully understanding what the importance is of those positions, or we have people understanding the power of those positions and then abusing that power. To Kathy's point about the communities that are taking matters into their own hands, we're seeing that a lot in different rural municipalities. And so I think that you guys must watch out for community-based organizations that become political parties. And we've seen a big trend of that over the past few years. AIC started off as a community activist organization about the zoning of Matatiele from KZN to the Eastern Cape, and from that basis became a national a party with national with a national presence. And I think that we're going to see this year a lot of these community-based organizations that have become that register as political parties because people are quite frankly just hurtful.
Okay, unless I've missed any hands, we've gone way over time. So I'm conscious of everybody's time and everyone's commitment and everything. So I don't know. Corinda, is that a new hand of yours?
I have a quick question, if I can please just pass it on, if that's fine.
Thanks, Corinda, because I'm also conscious of Dr. Mbete's time. We told her we'd get her out of here some time ago already. Thanks.
I'll take this question and then I'll wrap up. Sorry,
okay, cool. Thank you.
It's my
okay. Thank you. It's very, very quick. So when a municipality is under administration, at what point do ward councillors or peer councillors or anyone within the council, do they have any say within what is happening with that municipality, or do they have to wait until the municipality is lifted from administration? And then as we approach local government elections, I mean, what questions should we be asking those councillors within those municipalities that are under administration of how they would further improve that? Would they be able to improve that municipality, if that makes sense?
Okay, so when a municipality is under administration, basically the governance of that municipality is taken away from the councillors and from the and from the administration, and that is why a lot of municipalities resist being placed under administration. And so one of the things that I think that is very important to ask of councillors in municipalities that are under administration is, whether they're actually going to, firstly, how they will ensure proper governance of the municipality to be able to be taken out from, to be able to be released from being under administration. And often you're placed under administration because of because of the use of finances, because of public finances. And so the questions really to be asking those local councillors are about the finances of the municipality, and the efficient use of those finances, and whether they will be able to whether what are they promising, what can they guarantee about how the public finances are going to be used.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. Doc, are you happy? Is there anything else you'd like to add before we say thank you so much?
No, that's it for me. I'm just going, have fun with it. I love local government, issues and politics, and I love local government elections. And also, with the big things that we've got, like unemployment, right? There is so much that's in the scope of local government to be able to deal with the unemployment issues in the places under their control. And so even, something like, how are libraries being used to be job centers? You always see on Twitter all these young people talking about how they need money to be able to print CVs or to be able to print that Z83 form or whatever from government. Why aren't they being able to do that in their local library? That's what it's there for. So those big issues like unemployment matter at a local government level, but, think through how you can frame questions, frame the stories in terms of what the competence is of the local government level. So the use of libraries, the use of, how are recreational facilities being used and functioning? Are the municipalities creating an enabling environment for economic activity? And those kinds of things, I think, are very important questions to be asking. And so, and I'm around and available to ask questions and things.
Oh, that's wonderful to know. Thank you. I'm sure that everybody found it as informative as I did. I also love elections. I hope we all really take this opportunity to do the absolute best that we can, because it's an exciting time for our country. And yes, some of the issues are complicated and we need to do a lot of reading. So team, the onus is on us to just make sure that we've read up, that we understand, and that we're giving our audience the meaning that they're looking for when they're trying to make sense of what's happening and what's unfolding and all the numbers. So we do have a lot of homework on our plate. We've got to understand electoral processes. We've got to read. Doc, if there's any reading in particular that you think we should all be doing, please do send it to me and I'll share it with the team. But I just wanted to say on behalf of everybody at Newsroom Africa, thank you. Thank you, team, for making yourself available on a Saturday. And yes, that's it from me. Doc?
Fantastic. Thank you. And I will be sending more information. I mean, something that I realized that I didn't touch on at all is how in rural municipalities, also the relationship between local governments and traditional authorities. There's been a lot written on it, so I'll share some of that material with you. But and I'll keep sharing anything that I come across that I think may be interesting.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. If you're not working, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I really appreciate the time that you've dedicated.